Ann. This was her debut. I tricked her into it last week because we were trying to figure out how to rehearse if I was going to lead today, and then finally it dawned on me, Ann's standing right here. What if you do it next week, Ann? And in a moment of weakness, she said, yes. So she did awesome, and I'm so happy about that. When she threw me the worship list this week, she wanted to do an old hymn. She said, because she grew up in church like me and grew up singing hymns. So she threw a couple out there, and I said, you know what, for this week, why don't you make your worship jam this one that we just did, Softly and Tenderly. It's beautiful. And there was a word in there that we didn't edit in the slides, but she sang a little differently. Oh, sinner. That's a curious word. I just want to touch on it in a minute because it was there. We're not comfortable with that word. But actually in this series, we need to be comfortable with that word. The whole sin thing, there's a fancy definition of it. It's the disturbance of shalom. It's the culpable disturbance of shalom. Something's not right within us. Sometimes we are culpable. We're responsible for it. Sometimes we're not. But it's this thing that we're fighting, this thing that's with us. And sometimes just being honest about it and naming it is so important. That's what we learned last week. So we recognize we are powerless against this thing. If it's alcoholism, we are powerless against alcohol. And it was making our life unmanageable. And the reality is we all have something like that. And so sinner sticks because there's a very important part of naming that reality within us. It keeps us humble. So today we launch into a week 2. Let's jump into that. Trudy, perhaps? Unless it doesn't want to. So just to recall, this is what we're doing in this series. It's called Me Free, the deep spirituality of the 12 steps, and the Enneagram converge to grow you into your true self. Now, I greatly enhanced today's blog that we'll release at noon today with lots of helps on both these things. So there's links to the books that we're using in case you're interested in those. There's also lots of Enneagram stuff in there. So there's a link to the Enneagram Institute. If you're wondering who you are, how you fit this, look around on their website. You can see they have a pretty exhaustive, at least a cursory, in a cursory way, description of every type that you can hit right on their homepage. You can take a test. Costs you $12, but it's the best one out there to help you understand. It's a tool for you. It's a map to help you understand yourself. The whole point is personal growth, becoming who God created you to be. And a cool little add-in that I did this past week. My son Noah, they did some Enneagram stuff down at Pepperdine where he goes, and he sent me links to songs that were created for the different types by a real deal band. And there's 6 of the 9 are done. And so they're linked on my blog, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but it was actually the song that helped me figure out, or nailed down for sure, which one I'm in. I thought that was interesting. So you might want to check that out today. Really good stuff. And today, let's go on to the next slide. This is what we're looking at today. Last week was we understood that we were powerless. Today is about desperate desiring, that we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Let's say this out loud together, shall we? We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. She was just a girl from Kansas, and she could see the storm coming. Now, how many of you have been to Kansas before? Kansas is a great place to leave. It's actually a beautiful state in the northeast part because there are some different variations in elevation. Not significant, but they're there. And not all man-made. Some of them are natural. But there are some hills and some bluffs, and it's actually pretty. If you've ever been to Kansas City, they have some of these reflected in that area. But if you go from the eastern border of Kansas, say 50 miles or less west, that's what I'm getting at, left and west, depending how you're looking at it, you're going to be somewhere around Topeka, and once you get to about Manhattan for sure, that's where K-State is. If you look west, if it wasn't for the curvature of the earth, you could see the Rocky Mountains. Even though it's a solid, long day's drive away. There's nothing there. I mean, nothing. Lynn and I both grew up in Kansas. We understand Kansas, but when we were back a couple years ago for a family wedding and we're driving back on 70 through Kansas, we were like, Oh my gosh, we forgot how little there is here. I mean, you're going down the highway, there are fields, but you look to the right, to the left, to the front, there's nothing. You can't see a tree, nothing as far as the eye can see. It is mind-blowing. That's Kansas. So when I say that this Kansas girl could see a storm coming, it might have been next week's storm, but she could see that it was coming because it's so flat. She had no idea just what kind of a storm was headed her way, and not just for her, but for her little dog too. Toto apparently did not behave as a mature adult human should, and finally broke the last straw of a wicked witch of a neighbor who came with legal authority in hand to put that little dog down. She'd had enough of that nonsense. Dorothy, loving her dog more than life itself, bolted, hightailed it, ran away from home. No plan, no care, I'm out of here. Anything to save my little dog. And she runs into a con artist with a big heart who was in between selling his snake oil and reading fortunes and things, and saw this guy, and this guy, in his kindness, recognized quickly what was going on. Had her sit on the other side of the crystal ball, kind of figured out some things about her, enough to swindle her into believing that he actually knew that Aunt Em was heartbroken and panicking. Where did Dorothy go? Pulled on Dorothy's heartstrings, reminded her of what mattered for that moment. And she left that place and made it back to their homestead, but the storm was upon them. She couldn't get into the cellar, and they couldn't hear because if you've ever been around a tornado, they're loud, freight train. And so she's experiencing this, and the best she can do is go into the house, and you know what happens next. She is transported to an entirely different land, where she doesn't know her bearings. She has no idea what kind of journey she's about to ensue, and yet there she is. She hears about one who can restore her, one who can save her, one who can get her home, and it's the wonderful Wizard of Oz. All she has to do is follow the yellow brick road until she gets there. And on her journey, she finds some 3 strangers who become her friends. One, a scarecrow who's looking for his brain, a tin man who doesn't have a heart, and a lion who lacks courage. And together on this journey, they make their way through perilous episode after perilous episode to finally come before the great and wonderful Oz, having defeated the wicked witch, broom in hand, the proof. They find out, however, that the Oz wizard is a sham. But no worries. He has a hot air balloon. Of course. Why didn't we think a hot air balloon could get you back? And so the whole town gathers, and they're there to wish them well. And I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, back in the day, before Netflix and stuff, you saw this movie once a year, right? Coming up on Halloween. And we only had 3 stations to watch anyway, so you marked this on your calendar. And so it wasn't like you could binge it. So every year you waited. And I don't know about you, but those first several times that I watched The Wizard of Oz, and that balloon went away without Dorothy. Oh, I'm sorry. Spoiler alert. When the balloon went away without Dorothy, didn't your heart break? You're like, oh, no, you've been through so much, and now you're not going to get to go home. And you feel terrible for Dorothy. But then Glinda shows up. And she gives Dorothy this information, which sure would have been helpful so much sooner. That you're just some magic words and a few clicks away from home. And so she was. And of course, you know the other parts of the story. That the scarecrow had a mind the whole time. The Tin Man had a heart the whole time. The lion had courage the whole time, and Dorothy could have been at home the entire time. It's kind of our story. It's more. It's more than a child's tale. You know, there's a story a little bit like that in the Bible that we're going to talk about today. It's a succession of stories, actually, and the one we're going to really look at today is the third. But what I want to say to you before we get to that is that sometimes when we read the gospel accounts, which are sort of like biographies, we read them like today's news, like, okay, this happened, and then he went on to the next thing, like that's it. But we have to realize that the things that Jesus said in particular, and the behaviors that he chose, his character, his healing, the company he kept, the boundaries he crossed, all that stuff, he didn't just do them once. He did them all the time. And some of the stories that he told, these parables, he didn't just tell them once. He told them again and again and again. The disciples had heard these 100, maybe hundreds of times. Think political campaign. And the politicians are going around, and in one day they might say the same speech 10 times. And one group of 4 in this boardroom meeting, and another group of 3,000 or 30,000. Same speech, nuanced just a little bit for the context they find themselves in. That's how it was with these stories. That's why they were remembered so well. And so Jesus, his whole good news thing was that God was a God of love and grace, unconditionally so, bigger than we could possibly imagine. And so he told a series of stories to drive this home, this unconditional, unrelenting love of God. The first one went like this. A shepherd had 100 sheep. One of his sheep went missing. And so the shepherd left the 99 and went after the one that was lost, which is a terrible decision to make because you're putting the 99 now at risk from predators, from other shepherds who might steal your sheep, just to go after the one. But he goes and he finds the one. He makes his journey to the one dumb sheep who left. He takes it in his arms. He rushes back and he tells the other shepherds, I found my sheep. Let's have a party. And they do. They celebrate because the one that was lost had been found. And Jesus is saying, that's how God is. That when we wander off, God is relentless in coming after us. And when God finds us, he doesn't scold, because oftentimes our running away is scold enough. We don't need to be told, how dare you, or how awful we are, because we've been living it. The second story is about a woman who has 10 silver coins. She loses one of them, 1/10 of her income. And so she turns her house upside down, cleaning everything, trying to find this one coin. Seat cushions. She's looking under throw rugs. She's looking in weird places like her freezer. Maybe somehow it ended up in her freezer drawer. Who knows? And finally she finds it. And when she finds it, she calls all of her friends over and they have a big party because that coin which was lost was found. And so it is with God. That when God recognizes that one of God's children has gone missing, is lost, it's like no stone will be unturned is the idea here. But if you're in the audience, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, well, that's cool. So if I'm a sheep, God's going to come after me. And if I'm a coin, God will come after me. But sheep are really dumb. Sheep are really dumb. No offense if you're a sheep type person, but they're pretty dumb. And so you can expect a sheep to be dumb. Sheep are just going to be sheep. And coins don't even have a mind at all. There's no offense taken. You lost the coin. That's not me. But what if we make an intentional decision, as deeply offensive as we can imagine, against God? I wonder how God would act then if we totally, recklessly, intentionally, even maliciously did something to offend that God. Then, how is God going to react? So Jesus, reading our minds, offered a final story. It's called the prodigal son, although it could be called the prodigal God just as well. Do you know the story, the prodigal son? Raise your hand if you know the story. Great. Then let's talk about it again. So let's just walk through this thing. We're using the Message version, and we'll just truck right along. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. This is the worst possible thing any son could say to his father. He's saying to his dad, I don't like you. I don't love you. I don't want to be here with you. I wish you were dead, because if you were dead, I'd have your money. And that's really what I want. So, he's given the finger to his dad here and saying, I don't care. So there you go. There's the stage. Nobody could think of a worse thing than this. This is like the most egregious thing you could possibly do. Jesus comes up with the whopper. And then an unthinkable thing happens. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. That is unthinkable. What's normal is he'd say, well, you can go ahead and don't let the door hit you on the way out, but you're not getting a nickel, sonny. You don't want to be my son? Great. Good luck. That's what would have been the cultural norm. So we already get an idea that this father is different. So anyway, the scene is set. A few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land. And there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. The story just got worse. This is no big deal to us. Everybody loves a good pulled pork sandwich, but if you're Jewish, this is really bad. You are about as unclean as it's going to get. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him. Unthinkable to a Jew. But no one gave him anything to eat. When he finally came to his senses, what an interesting phrase. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, look at that. I will go home to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. Can you imagine how long it took him to get to that place? How long did it take for him to come to his senses, to recognize that what he had left was actually what he longed for? Well, on the next slide, we see what happens. So he returned home to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Now, just a couple things I want you to note here right away, just to point out some cultural stuff, because you're not all too familiar with this story. That when we see that while still a long way off, his father saw him coming, that tells us something about Dad. Dad is not ticked off. Dad is not frustrated. He's not fuming at home. He's not throwing darts at a picture of his son. He's looking to the horizon every day. Oh, if my son would only show up. If my son would only come home. There is a longing in this father's heart to see his son return home. And once he sees him, a very odd thing happens. He's filled with love and compassion, which led him to look in the first place, but he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. Back in those days at that time, we're talking about a wealthy man here. If you are a wealthy man, a prestigious man, you don't run anywhere. It is beneath you to run. So the fact that this guy pulls up his robe and hauls out there as fast as he can just gives us a very different picture. This isn't, think about what it could look like. This isn't Dad, seeing what's going on and then telling a couple of his servants, I'll be in my tent. Bring Sonny to me when he shows up. And sitting behind a big oak desk like the Godfather, he doesn't look over and say, oh, I see you're back. It doesn't say cower before me. No, he runs to meet him. And when he meets him, he doesn't hit him. He embraces him and kisses him, because that is the picture of God. And before, he's not even paying attention to the speech that this kid has been rehearsing for this whole journey. And so he blows that off and says, but his father said to the servants, quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him, meaning I'm going to put you right back in the look that you were before. And then he says, and get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. That ring for his finger, most scholars believe, was a signet ring. This is what you would use to make deals on behalf of the Father. This made you a signer on the checking account, legal authority. He is completely reinstating his son to sonship in the estate. Wow. That's what God does. And then he goes on, and kill the calf we have been fattening. We must celebrate with, cliff note, a feast. For this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found. So the party began. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he had heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. Your brother's back, he was told, and your father has killed the fattened calf. Well, celebrating because of his safe return. Now, before we go to the next slide, of course, older brother's going to hear this. He sees how it's wrecked his dad for all this time. Oh, man, I can't wait to get into this party. Of course we're going to celebrate. I can't wait to go give him a big hug myself. That's how the story we think should go. But that's not how the story goes. So we go to the next frame. And the older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, oh, hold on. The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. Now, you and I, we see this, and we just think, oh, yeah, we've seen this before. People staying out in their cars or whatever. In this culture, when the patriarch throws a party, you go to the party. For you not to go to the party is a major offense to the host of the party. This is, as a friend from many years ago said, this was the ultimate turd in the punch bowl moment. You're welcome to use that phrase as much as you like. This was the party ruining effect of all party ruining things, because the servants are getting word the older brother is outside. He's not wanting to come in. And there is a damper on the celebration. Kind of like, if you watched the U.S. Open yesterday, kind of like that, where there's controversy with Serena Williams and the rightful winner and all that, and it sort of put a momentary damper on the rightful celebration of this new champion. Kind of like that. So the dad heard what's going on. My son is right up. Wait a minute. My son is not coming into my party? He's still the father. He doesn't say, like we might think he should, and the culture would expect him to. He doesn't say, well, I guess he's not eating tonight. And we're going to have a serious talk about this come morning. But I'm going to try the best I can to have a good time tonight. That's what we would expect, but that's not what happens. The father humbles himself and chooses to go out to find his son. He finds him. He doesn't just find him, he begs him. But he replied, the son, all these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And in all that time, you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yeah, when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf. Just let those words sink in a moment. We discover that the older brother has some issues, doesn't he? We find ourselves face to face with a great irony. That the older brother has been living in the house, but he hasn't come home yet. He's living in the house, but he is not home. The next slide, we see how things finish out. His father said to him, look, dear son, isn't that beautiful? Dear son, you've always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found. So there's some things here that we can't miss. We're going to talk about the younger and the older son here in a moment, and that's often where we go, and we're going to go there too. But let's remember what the story is really trying to get across. This is the third of three, all trying to communicate one clear thing, that this God of ours is not like the God you might expect. This isn't the God, the mean judge that's just, keeping the list and checking it twice and is going to kick your butt and let you know every time you got it wrong and you just better watch it or else. That's a picture of God that we naturally ascend to. And yet the Jesus picture of God is this God who is prodigious with love and grace and acceptance. That love and grace is not contingent on a thing. Yeah, we see the younger brother coming back around, but the older brother received all kinds of love and grace from the Father, and he was in no way repentant. And yet the Father and the love was there for him, beckoning him home. This is all about the Father's love. This is all about, this is going to end okay. And as Jesus is communicating to a wide variety of people, in villages and in cities and in countrysides, people who wondered if they'd really be welcomed by God, the absolute answer is yes. I'm going to be welcomed home. I'm going to be welcomed home because that is the nature of God. And so I actually want you to say that because I think it's critical that we have this foundation that we try to build on that really does trust and believe that there is a power greater than ourselves that can save us. And that power is loving and good and will welcome us home. So I just challenge you right now to say out loud, I will be welcomed home. I want you to try that again. I will be welcomed home. The reason I want you to say it out loud is because something happens to you when you do. You're using your brain in a different way. You're articulating something, and it carries more weight when you say it. So one last time, I will be welcomed home. Now I want you to look across the table or across the room, wherever, and I want you to say to somebody, you will be welcomed home. Do it again. Say it to somebody. And one last time, you will be welcomed home. The reason I wanted you to do that is because sometimes we won't believe it if we say it, but if somebody else tells us, well, then we'll believe it. And you just got to say it again because every person you looked at will be welcomed home. You will be welcomed home. It took many years of watching The Wizard of Oz before I didn't get anxious when that darn balloon floated away. Because I knew how the story was going to end. I knew that it was going to be all right. That the magic words and the clicks of her heels was going to land her home. And she was going to discover that Glinda the Good Witch was right, that home was just right there, that close. She had to go through this crazy journey to figure that out, to find out that she had a brain, to find out that she had a heart, to find out she had more courage than she thought. And all those things culminated in letting her finally believe that she could go home. So this foundation, that this thing is real, that it's going to end well, that we are truly deeply loved by God, that has to be the foundation. So now, knowing that, let's talk about younger and older brother briefly. Younger brother's easy to talk about. He's probably been talked about way more than the younger brother or the older brother. The younger brother is kind of your classic story of alcoholism or any kind of drug dependency kind of thing. This guy hits rock bottom. And he had a kind of a gift in that. We've been talking about this the last couple of weeks in Praxis, that there is a gift in being able to say, I'm an alcoholic, because usually people who finally get to that point recognize, yeah, I really did hit rock bottom. I have recognized I am powerless against this. My life is no longer manageable. I had my program for happiness and it is not working, and I am done. I can't beat this thing. There is a real necessary thing to be able to say that, and guys like the younger son have the gift, as they call in the program, the gift of desperation, G-O-D. The gift of being at rock bottom, the gift of being able to say, it's alcohol for me. I can't touch it anymore. It will kill me, and it will. And some of you might be right there, where you are fully aware, it might not be alcohol or drugs, maybe it is, but maybe it's something else, that your life is off the rails. The wheels have come off the bus, and it's all caught up with you. And there's no more denying it anymore. It's a suck fest in your life, and you know it, and other people know it, and you don't know if you're going to climb out of this thing. You know that you're powerless. You can't. And so you come to step 2, and you're wondering, can I trust this other thing? And the statements of Jesus are, yes, you're going to be welcomed home. Trust the love and grace of God to take the first step home. The invitation has always been there. From the day you left to the day you return, it will always be there. Come home. So if we look at the older brother and the younger brother kind of on a spectrum where this guy knows he's hit rock bottom, knows he's got a problem, and he's making the step to call out to this higher other who will help redeem him, recover, restore him to sanity. Then on the other side, we need to talk about the younger brother, or the older brother. I keep calling the younger brother. The older brother. The older brother obviously has issues. He's got stuff going on under the hood that he doesn't even know about, but now it's coming out. He's a little closer to the bottom after this little exchange with Dad. Because I'm wondering who came alongside him and said, yikes, man. Wow, I was just over there and I heard the things you said. Is he going to kill you? Seriously, your dad? And he's taking pause and he's realizing what he said. Realizing those came from somewhere. He's not as home as he thought he was. He's in the house, but he's not home. It's hard to be the older brother. And my guess is that most of us are on the side of the older brother much more than we are on the younger brother. There's a gift of being the younger brother, of hitting bottom, because you know you're at the bottom and you know you need help getting up. But so many of us are in that space in between where we have no idea really where we stand or where we are or who we are. And as long as we're getting by okay, we're feeling all right. We feel at home. We're in the house. Aren't we at home? And that's where the Enneagram actually becomes very helpful. It's not the answer all, but it's a pretty interesting guide to make us ask some questions about who we are, how we're wired, what has shaped us, and how that shaping has influenced how we think about everything and live our lives. So I discovered, after some much more careful consideration and reflection, I thought, and I'd been saying for a little while, that I'm a 7. I'm sure I'm a 7, which may not mean anything to you if you haven't done anything, so just roll with me here for a minute. And then we were with Noah last weekend before Lakin flew out, and he's playing these songs that I mentioned for us. And he comes across number 3. And he plays the song for number 3, which often is mistyped. 7s are often mistyped as 3. So I thought I was a 7 for sure, because there are some things about 7s that certainly fit me. But the more I listen to that song, the more I realize, there's something here. And it's kind of funny, because Noah's been into this stuff, because Pepperdine does a lot with the Enneagram stuff. And Noah was looking at me dead on while this song was playing, because I think Noah knows. And he wanted to see how I was going to react. And I'm sure I did, even though I'm pretty good at hiding. It's a funny thing about the Enneagram. We take the test, we read through the stuff, and one of the little jokes is the type you are is probably the one you least want to be. And the reason that is because you see some things about yourself in that description, and you're like, no way, man. I don't want to be a 3 because of whatever it is. I want to be a 7. Let me run to 7 land because for some reason that feels safer. But that just points all the more back to who you really are. So one of the things that is helpful on the Enneagram Institute site is you can go there. There's a link in my blog that you can check out. It's in the teaching part of the website if you want to look at that. It'll release at noon today. Is they give you a pretty good description of the types and what you're up against. And one of the things that they have, if you scroll down far enough, is they call the levels of development. And so they describe healthy levels, average levels, and unhealthy levels. And I think these in particular help you, me anyway, can help us understand where we are on the spectrum between older brother and younger brother, between unhealthy places where the younger or the older brother surely was, and where health is, where it's just living in the house, and when are we really home? And so I just want to read these to you. And the funny thing is now that I read these, I can celebrate 3. And you're going to hear these and you're going to be like, oh, I want to be a 3. And I'm telling you, you can't be. Yep. Unless you are, then you're welcome to be. But, I'm a 3. So now I'm happy about it because the healthy levels sound pretty good. So let me read these to you. Level 1, at their best. When a 3 is at their best, they are self-accepting, inner-directed, and authentic. Everything they seem to be. Modest and charitable, self-deprecatory and humor, and a fullness of heart emerge. Gentle and benevolent. Yeah, all right. I want to be that. Level 2, still healthy but not as healthy. Self-assured, energetic, and competent with high self-esteem. They believe in themselves and their own value. Adaptable, desirable, charming, and gracious. Level 3 in health. Ambitious to improve themselves, to be the best they can be. Often become outstanding, a human ideal, embodying widely admired cultural qualities. I think we can all agree on that one, can't we? They're highly effective. Others are motivated to be like them in some positive way. And then you go into the average levels, where most people who are 3s spend their time. They're highly concerned with their performance, doing their job well, constantly driving self to achieve goals as if self-worth depends on it. Terrified of failure. Compare self with others and search for status and success. Become careerists, social climbers, invested in exclusivity and being the best. Level 5. Become image conscious, highly concerned with how they are perceived. Begin to package themselves according to the expectations of others and what they need to do to be successful. Pragmatic and efficient, but also premeditated, losing touch with their own feelings beneath a smooth facade. Problems with intimacy, credibility, and phoniness emerge. A little less healthy. Want to impress others with their superiority, constantly promoting themselves, making themselves sound better than they really are. Narcissistic with grandiose, inflated notions about themselves and their talents. Exhibitionistic and seductive, as if saying, look at me. Arrogance and contempt for others is a defense against feeling jealous of others and their success. And we get into unhealthy levels, level 7. Fearing failure and humiliation, they can become exploitative and opportunistic, covetous of the success of others, and willing to do whatever it takes to preserve the illusion of their superiority. Level 8. Devious and deceptive, so that their mistakes and wrongdoings will not be exposed. Untrustworthy, maliciously betraying or sabotaging people to triumph over them, delusionally jealous of others. Level 9, the bottom of unhealth. Become vindictive, attempting to ruin others' happiness, relentless, obsessive about destroying whatever reminds them of their own shortcomings and failures. Psychopathic behavior generally corresponds to the narcissistic personality disorder. Once I read that, first of all, had some cringe factor because I recognized some older brother tendencies in me. And some of those are almost a lifetime ago now. When I was in my early 20s, of course I'm immature, I'm in my early 20s. I haven't refined much, haven't hit the wall enough. But I remember, honestly, pardon me, I remember times when I was just a serious jackass. Just an ass. And because my job kind of depends on me not being an ass, I saved most of it for my wife. And my harshness and my need to be successful, I just rolled that right over to her. I'm so sorry, because I know I was an ass. I remember conversations when I lost control. Never physically violent, but I'm a professional speaker. I know how to do it well. And it was ugly, unwarranted, uncalled for, older brother crap. And I did not know what was going on beneath the surface. I was in the house, but I was not home. And the thing about older brother tendencies is when we are in that space, we don't know how much pain we are inflicting on those around us. We have no idea. Just like the younger brother is thinking all about himself and all about what he wants to do, even if it's going to totally ruin his life, the gift is that he finally figured it out, but the older brothers are still in the house but not at home while the party is going on. And they just don't know. Now, luckily, I've matured over the years. And not proactively, because we don't do it that way as human beings. Even though I love self-growth, I read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People in my early 20s because I wanted to find out how I could be the most effective I could possibly be. I've always been driven like that. And yet, the deepest, hardest stuff, we got to get kicked in the teeth. And I have been. And some of those times were in very appropriate ways by my wife, who's a gift to me. So on the next slide, we get a picture of some of these. Let me hit this quote too, because this has to do with surrendering, which is such an important piece. It says, Rohr says, the surrender of faith does not happen in one moment, but is an extended journey, a trust walk, a gradual letting go, unlearning and handing over. Can you hear that? Some of us think this is a one and done decision. Like if we just say yes, then it's all going to get better. It is not like that. Life is all process. It's all process. Where I am now is not where I want to be. I feel pretty good about my life and I'm growing, but because of this Enneagram stuff, I'm recognizing, man, I still have this thing that is, it has me more than I have it. Now at least I know, what the thing is that I need to go after. But I know that this is going to be something that I wrestle with and manage the rest of my life. Hopefully, I can get increasingly more healthy. But the reality is, I have to know that this is not going to be over. Dar and I, over the years, because we overhear 12-step meetings all the time, and we're constantly going into the kitchenette to grab water or whatever, and we'll hear somebody stand up and say, hi, I'm whoever, I'm an alcoholic, and everybody says, hi. And we wondered to ourselves, man, how long do they need to be telling themselves they're an alcoholic? And the answer is forever. Forever. We look at it from our perspective as, well, doesn't that just kind of keep them down in the trenches and mess with them the whole time? That's their identity now? Now they're never going to grow out of that? And the answer is no. That keeps them humble because they recognize constantly, this is a struggle I am going to be in my whole life. And just as an alcoholic needs to call it alcohol, I need to call mine, on the next slide, the need to be successful. We'll get to that on a number 3 letter. Let's go back and finish the quote, though. Thank you. So anyway, it's a gradual letting go, unlearning, and handing over. No one does it on the first or even second try. Desire and longing must be significantly deepened and broadened. To finally surrender ourselves to healing, we have to have 3 spaces opened up within us, and all at the same time. Our opinionated head, our closed down heart, and our defensive and defended body. Just like Dorothy had to figure out what to do with her head, her heart, and her courage. We've got a journey we have to make as well, and be willing to take it. Now on the next slide, you get a little hint here in case you have no idea. See if any of these resonate with your primary need, what really is significant to you in your life. The need to be perfect, the need to be needed, the need to succeed, or at least appear successful for me, the need to be special or unique, the need to perceive or understand, the need to be sure or certain or secure, the need to avoid pain, the need to be against, the need to avoid, Now, all of us have smatterings of all of these things. But I'm guessing that even as you look at this list, there's probably going to be one, maybe two, maybe three, but probably one or two that really seem stronger for you. And I hope that whets your appetite to help you understand who you are and how you're wired. And I hope that when I read those things, the levels of health, I hope that it will spark in you a desire to find out, oh my goodness, I had no idea that I was capable of these things, and that somebody has nailed it, and somebody has identified this, and I wonder what I'm doing in my life. I wonder how much I think I'm home when I'm really just in the house. And so that list helps you figure out, okay, this is where you're just in the house. Then the question is, do you want to come home? Is there a desperate desiring to come home? And the next quote from Richard Rohr on the next slide says, mere mental belief systems split people apart, whereas actual faith puts all our parts, body, heart, head, on notice and on call, and offers us a new broadband station with full surround sound instead of a static-filled monotone. Honestly, it takes major surgery and much of one's life to get head, heart, and body to put down their defenses. They're false programs for happiness. There it is. They're false programs for happiness. That's how I'm defining addiction, by the way, is what is my false program for happiness? And there are many forms of resistance to what is right in front of them. This is the meat and the muscle of the whole conversion process. Some of you, when I announced I was going to do a thing that talked about the spirituality of 12 steps, you're like, oh, good grief. Good for the alcoholics, bad for me because I don't need the 12 steps. Yes, you do. Because this is not about alcoholism. This is about us becoming who we are meant to be in the fullness of Christ. And we are all addicted to something. I am asking you to do the hard work of looking at yourself deeply to find out where are you just in the house and you are not yet home. It's hard work, it's painful work, but it is the work of life and faith. And it leads to joy and wholeness. And I'm wondering even now if you are starting to hear the beckon of the Holy Spirit saying to you, come home. I've been calling you your whole life to come home deeper and deeper. The next slide, just a couple things from Rohr, which I thought were really good. He said, I think our hearts need to be broken and broken open at least once to have a heart at all, or to have a heart for others. I love this because he talks about, in the beginning of this chapter, I didn't put the quote in there, but he talks about a quote that somebody said somewhere. He didn't even know, I don't think. He said that religion is for people who are scared of hell. Spirituality is for people who have been through hell. And this deep spirituality that we're talking about is for people who know they're in hell. They're going through hell. And because hopefully I've tweaked you a little bit today, you might just do some hard work to find out just what kind of hell you might be in. And what kind of hell you may have been causing all around you unawares. And finally, I love this. When all of you is there, you will know. When all of you is present, the banquet will begin. You know, there's a reason why Jesus in John's chapter 3 called it being born again, because that's what it's like. When you have hit rock bottom, when you have come to an awareness of how you've messed it up, and this happens repeatedly over our life. For me, it was this week. You know, just seeing again. I mean, I knew that it wasn't right, but to recognize that this is a danger of my type, and that I am guilty of some of these things in my immaturity and unhealth and my disease. I recognize that this cannot go on, and it hasn't gone on in that way for so long. But even still, I got to walk forward in this. And so coming home does present a born-again, again experience. People who have come to that know their home. The younger son who finally came home, who was in the party, he knew he was home. It wasn't going to be the last time he needed this kind of exchange with his father. But I'm wondering, have you ever come home? Have you ever experienced that born-again freshness, newness of life, which only God can give you? It is possible that you have been in the house, even in this house, for a very long time, and have yet to come home to real faith, to a real newness of life. That is what is before you. You know, Paul the apostle was so convinced that this is true, that this is reality, that God does this, and certainly God did it for him, that he gives a benediction to the church in Thessalonica in the next screen. So rich. Paul says, "May the God of peace make you whole and holy. May you be kept safe in body, heart, and mind, and thus ready for the presence." God has called you and will not fail you. May the God of peace make you whole and holy. May you be kept safe in body, heart, and mind, and thus ready for the presence. God has called you and will not fail you. Say it out loud with me. May the God of peace make you whole and holy, and may you be kept safe in body, heart, and mind, and thus ready for the presence. God has called you and will not fail you. The older brother was not safe. He did not realize how safe he was. In his insecurity, he was not well in body, heart, and mind. All of us are the older brother to one degree or another. The Father has come out of the party, is begging us, come home. Let's pray together. Just take a moment and let the Spirit of God do a thing in you. What did you need to hear today? What does come home mean to you? Are you just in the house, or are you home? God who redeems us. God who looks to the horizon, waiting for us to appear. God who sprints to embrace us and kiss us, to restore us to our sonship and daughtership. God who throws a party because the one who is lost is found, the one who is dead is alive. God who comes out of the party to beg once more to another son who doesn't know he's not yet home. To you, O God, we are so grateful for your character, for your relentless love that will welcome us home, to which we are invited. God, help us. Help us see. Help us know who we are. Help us grow to who we are called to become. Help us not just live in the house, but help us come home. Congregation, come home. Come home. All who are weary, come home. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.